Hi, and welcome to Be Above Leadership's podcast. The world needs our weirdness. Lively and unscripted conversations for anyone who has ever felt they were a little bit different. I'm Ursula Pottinger and one of the founding partners of Be Above.
And I'm Ann Betts, the other founding partner. Join us as we share our own weirdness and how this has shaped how we see the world. We'll be exploring coaching, neuroscience, consciousness, and anything else that takes our fancy.
Well, hello. Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to The World Needs More of Our Weirdness podcast. I'm here with Anne. I'm Ursula. And today we are going to look at something really, really fascinating. And that is, what is the difference between the mind and the brain? Isn't it the same thing? Is it interchangeable? Like, what the heck is going on with that?
And, we were just talking beforehand and sort of, about how to do this and frame it and everything. And, one of the things that's really true for me is it might not seem that important, but it's actually really critical and more so now than ever before. So really, we are anyone in the human development world, coaches, therapists, etc. We're actually not just dealing with people's brains. We are dealing, and we're not just using our brains. We are actually using our minds to work with their minds. And that is a different thing than just trying to figure out solely how the brain works. And I'm reminded, Ursula, real quick, I'm just reminded of one of our teachers, Dr. Dan Siegel, basically asking every group that he presented in front of, okay, we're working with the mind, and how many of you have ever had, these are probably mostly therapists, but however many of you have ever had a class on what the mind is? And it
Mhm.
was like 1 out of 10. Right? Like nobody knew, but we're
Nobody knew
dealing
it,
with the
and
mind.
nobody had a definition for
Right.
what it really was. And the other interesting thing before we share with you what his definition is, what's interesting about that is that especially for you and I and the kind of work that we do, we are known in the coaching field. We're known for bringing neuroscience, the science of the brain,
Right.
to people. And that's clearly not where we're stopping. I mean, that's part of it.
Right.
That's
Right. And
that's just a
actually,
little part.
Ursula, what I find really, really fascinating, if you look at our program, and often what I say to the students, the first 2 quarters are very much about the brain.
Yes.
And then in quarter 3 and in quarter 4, we move beyond the brain because you cannot stop just with the brain. It doesn't tell the whole picture.
Yeah. Doesn't tell the
Um,
whole story.
And you know what I find really lovely about how Dan Siegel, kind of came to this a realization and then worked to resolve it is that nobody had like a definition for what the mind is. Now, what I remember from original neuroscience class, now this is not the right definition, but I'm going to share it with you anyway because I think it is what most people or many people think, but it's not correct. And then we'll give you Dan's, which is more correct. But neuroscientists historically have said that the mind is what the brain does. So it's like it's all about what's here in our skull. So what Dan Siegel did is he pulled together a cross-disciplinary group of like, I want to say he had like anthropologists and neuroscientists and psychologists and a whole bunch of people. And they talked for a couple of years. It wasn't like right away. Because he wanted to find a definition that everybody could go, yes, that's it. That's not just a domain specific definition. That's a definition that, from the perspective of sociology or cultural anthropology, that still works. So
Yeah.
I just think that's so brave of him to say, I don't have to be the hierarchical, top of the heap, only one who has ever figured anything out, right?
Well, and I'm also imagining that it was probably quite fun, but also incredibly complex
Yeah.
because everybody came with a different perspective of what they knew, depending on the discipline, and then bringing this all together in a sentence or two sentences that helps us sort of all go, oh, that is
Mhm.
really what it is, I think is absolutely brilliant.
Really cool. And I think, as I remember the story, having heard him speak many times, I think how the story went is that after having these meetings and kind of grappling with this and getting all this input, I think it kind of came to him that
Yes.
he can't, he's like, okay, here's a definition. I'll tell you what it is in a sec. And then checked it out. And everybody's like, that was great. But it emerged out of this collaborative process. It wasn't
Yes.
just him separate.
Yeah.
So, and this is actually part of the definition of the mind. So here's Dan Siegel's definition. The mind is an embodied and relational process, not a thing. Brain is a thing you can see, you can poke it, you can do surgery on it, right?
Yeah. You can put it
It's
in the scanner and see
you put
it.
in the scanner, see where the energy is going. But that he says the mind is not a thing. I really love this. It's an embodied and relational process which regulates the flow of energy and information. And boy, I tell you, Ursula and I have heard that definition for probably 15 years now. And if you're sort of like, huh? Don't worry, because we have kind of spent a fairly long time trying to unpack that and go like, what does that actually mean to human beings? So when we say the mind is embodied, Ursula, what do you make of that?
I mean, that is the first thing that I absolutely love about the definition. So the mind is embodied. So number one, not only is it in the body, we carry it with us, but it is also drawing information and resources from the body. So it's not just this thing in here that gives us information, but it is the whole
The
system,
whole, right.
the
The
whole
whole
chain.
system of
Yeah.
the human body. And I also think there's a part of the embodied that acknowledges that there is this. This is an embodied
Yes.
part of us.
Yes.
So it includes the brain, but is not limited to the brain. And I think that's my understanding of how that works. It's like, yep, it's your brain.
Yep.
And it's also this very complicated system that holds memory,
Yes.
holds trauma, holds
Yeah.
understanding, and is so much bigger than just the brain that
Yeah.
it often is more attuned to things that are happening on a very subtle level that
Yeah.
the brain is like, huh?
Well, absolutely. I mean, without going into the details of the embodied, the system, what it gives us. But when I just think about the gut, which is
Hmm.
in the body, it's
Hmm.
part of the embodied system. Like, just think about how much information we get from the gut. Our
Hmm.
gut feeling, the intuition
Hmm.
of thinking like, ooh, or how we feel about something. It's like, this doesn't feel right. This makes my stomach upset.
Well, and what's fascinating, we play with this in our program, our neuroscience certification for coaches, is how much of language and who we are
Yeah.
as humans is also modulated by language. It's
Yes.
part of how we show up in the world is linguistically. How much of our language is like you said, I don't know, that kind of makes me sick to my stomach, or,
Yeah.
I've got a gut feeling about this, and I just had to pull the plug on a small um, partnership opportunity. And what I just kept saying to Ursula as I'm trying to figure out, should I do this or not, is I just kept saying it doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
And I wasn't saying it doesn't think right. I did say there are some things that are not lining up, but
Yeah.
the first awareness
Yeah.
actually was more of a body awareness that something feels off.
You
The
know, you know what's fascinating about that is I have a similar example, except for me, it was the other way round. I first had thinking, um, so I'm working on an ebook, and I had the outline and everything ready, and the research and all of that. So the thinking came first. And then a couple of days ago, I sort of went for a walk and I was pondering all that. And then I went to the heart. There was
Mm,
something, all of a sudden, I had
mm,
this little bell was going off in
mm.
my body, in my heart, going like, there's something not quite right here. And then a day later, I was in a different scenario. And again, I had the same hit. There was something in here that made me feel really unsettled. And I
Huh.
thought, oh, I need to listen to that now.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
thinking brain told me one thing, the embodied mind told me something else.
That's amazing. That's so cool. And I think this is where we come to, and we also learned this largely from Dan Siegel and our
Yeah.
own experience, is that it's not a war. It's not a head or heart. It's, it's a head and heart. And in both of our cases, we were getting information. There were a couple things that for me with this partnership logically didn't make sense.
Yeah.
And there was also a felt sense of, I don't like this. And often that's the information that I like to say our bodies are pretty simple in how they communicate. And they usually communicate something along the lines of me like that, me don't like that.
Yes. Or me have a doubt about it.
You wonder about that. It's not like, and then you have to use your good brain,
Yeah.
or in this case, and we're going to talk about that in a second, or both your good brain to go, what about this? But then also
Yeah.
the relationship.
It's
So
embodied and relational.
relational. So our minds, who we are, how we exist in the world is, I think it was John Donne who said, no man is an island.
Yeah.
We are not. We are
Yeah.
relational beings.
Yeah.
And we modulate and modify each other's experience. So those are
Yeah.
also some, we'll tag those words to talk more about. But so very commonly, I'm aware there's something happening here. I don't feel right about it. And I'm going to check with somebody. I'm going to check with my best buddy. 'Cause she's got a great brain and she got her own body to kind of check in
Yeah.
with, how does this sound to you?
Yeah.
And that is how we are designed. And
Yeah.
this idea that it only counts if you can think of it yourself is such utter nonsense. And it's not in alignment with the idea of our minds, which are not limited
Yeah.
to our physical, they include our physical system,
Yeah.
but they extend to the energetic systems around us.
Yeah. They extend to the relationships that we have and that are useful. And just like you, like intuitively, I reached out to the person that helped me shape this ebook, and I said, we need to put a pause button on here. And actually, I need a call with you for 30 minutes because I'm having some doubts about this. And I need you to help me unpack this and see how we can reshape it so it makes more sense to me. And I'm not having this very strange feeling that sits right here. Because I knew I needed another person to help me unpack this in this relationship.
I love that. And I think about, in coaching. So, and many of you are coaches, and we're coaches. Ursula and I have been coaches since the year 2000-ish.
Yep.
Long time. That a lot of what I do for my clients is I give them an extension of their mind, not necessarily of their brain. I mean, I have had clients historically, have them now, who know things about things I know nothing about, right?
Yeah.
you know,
Totally.
PhD shrimp farmer that I coached for a while, like I don't know anything about that. So it's not an extension of the brain, but I can be a place to think with,
Yes.
a place to sort of a neutral, because as coaches, we're trained with neutrality to not, and the image that often comes up to me, Ursula, is like an empty chalkboard,
Mm.
versus in a lot of relationships, we have a relationship, the chalkboard's already full of biases and shoulds, and
Yep.
you want to go process something. How
Mhm.
do I feel about this? I want to process it with a space where there's a lot to write rather than someplace that's like already decided,
Yeah.
what I should do or what that means to me. And we get trained to be these empty, but highly productive spaces for our clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on top of that, back to Dan Siegel, and it's a relational process. We also feel each other through that more embodied, through the embodied system. We
Absolutely.
know each other through that. We don't know each other biologically thinking about, who is Anne. No, I get to know you because I can feel you. My
I
heart
know, and I'm
knows
thinking
you.
like more on that, but I'm just remembering back in the days when I used to date. This has been a while because I don't date anymore. But back in the day, and Ursula would say, "Well, how was it? Did we like him?" And it was always a we. It was the cutest thing. Anyway, I'll not go there. But did we like him? And I would say, "Well, he looked good on paper."
Mhm.
They look good
Yeah,
on paper. My brain said, yes, check, check, check. My body said, I don't want to be here.
yeah,
And I didn't, and we can try to make sense of that. And sometimes that's super helpful. And sometimes it's enough to just know, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be in this job. I don't want to be on this date. I don't want to be in this relationship. And how do I then, make some sense of that? Uh, but I'm going to listen to that.
yeah.
And you raise a really interesting point. So when I think about in coaching, and I use the body a lot in coaching because I think it's absolutely best practice. And I think it's absolutely a crying shame that the ICF does not highlight this more as a critical competency for coaching because it gets so far when I use the body in
Yeah.
coaching. And I think about a lot of times I might be asking a client to embody a certain, strong way of being, or I might ask them, to check in internally to see what's going on, butterflies in the stomach and like that. But the other way is that I'm a tuning fork.
Hmm.
I'm with my client in deep presence with them, and my body is
Hmm.
mirroring through something
Hmm.
called mirror neurons, is
Hmm.
mirroring what's going on over there. Now, again, because I'm trained and I didn't just do a weekend training, I'm trained as a coach, certified as a coach, I'm professional. I don't just assume that if my body's feeling that's what's going on, but I ask.
Yeah.
I notice as you're talking about that, my throat feels tight. Is there anything going on for you? Is that just me? Or is there anything there for you?
Yeah.
So that I get to use my physical attunement to maybe open something up for the client.
Yeah. And that then brings me back to the other sort of part of the quote and the definition rather. It's a process that helps regulate the flow of energy and information, because that's really what you're talking about right
Yeah.
now, as the way I see it, is because we are attuned and we are this tuning fork. We actually help our clients be, number one, be more attuned to their own embodied feelings, but also we help them regulate this flow of energy.
Right. And I think what's so interesting, and I want to point out about that definition, is that definition is neutral. It's not positive or negative.
Mm,
We are always this embodied and relational process regulating the flow of energy and information. And we have a trauma program, and we work, to teach coaches how to work with relational trauma. And one of the things that we all, there's a lot there, and lots of people have gone through this, but I think as a child, your mind was helping you regulate the flow of energy and information. And part of that may have been learning adaptive strategies. For most of us, there's
yeah.
some kind of adaptive strategy that we learned when we were very young in order to stay connected to what felt like survival in our family.
Yes.
Now as coaches and coming out of that, we may say that worked when I was 3. I survived, but it's now getting in the way of my thriving. My
Hmm.
adaptive strategy, because I was regulating the flow of energy and information. There's a lot of energy coming at me
Yes.
that was negative because I maybe was sassy, by the way. I got called sassy, not in a good way. Don't sass, don't be so sassy. Uh, and so adaptive strategy is try to make myself smaller.
Yeah.
I'm going to regulate that energy
Yes.
by creating a strategy that says, don't be too big, because
Yeah.
that could be dangerous. And that's just one example. So
Yeah.
this
And I
definition is
really,
neutral.
yeah, I love that. I love that example because it really shows that these adaptive strategies really, the point of them was to help us regulate that flow of energy information. Because if you've got all that coming at you, we needed to find some strategies to regulate that in some way.
Yeah.
Some of that was useful and some of it just wasn't.
And this also, and I think this is where you were going to go, so maybe you want to say more about it, but I want to kind of lob it in here, which is that, again, from the perspective of coaching, um, I would say 99.9% of the time in the hundreds of people that I've coached, they either say or it's abundantly clear that they feel a ton better at the end of the session. And
Yes.
that's not me bragging. That's what happens when you are listened to without judgment and you are in a relationship of care and
Yeah.
you get to focus on yourself for half an hour, 45 minutes, or an
Yeah.
hour, that people may come in very discombobulated and it at least feel somewhat better because the relationship is restorative.
And it's safe. We provide safety, which really can help, this regulation. If my nervous system is not grounded or it's starting to be wobbly, I need a person whose nervous system is stable that I can lean into, and be heard and feel I am okay and I'm safe here to just say, here's how I feel.
Absolutely. And this is also why, as coaches, Ursula and I always say self care is not an option because you've got to have
Yeah.
your nervous system stable so you can be there for your clients. But I think about little children, babies, their ability to regulate that they are not born with an ability to regulate. They externalize that and they need a good enough mom or caregiver, good enough. We do not have to be perfect, who will provide the soothing and the stabilization until they are able to basically regulate themselves. They can't. And so babies cry and we soothe them and they learn
Yeah.
either that the world is a dangerous and unsafe place and nobody's going to help you, in which case their nervous systems develop to be on high alert all the time, or they learn that they're basically safe, that somebody cares and somebody
Yeah.
will be there to help them regulate. Um, and this, I like what I don't consider good enough parenting is parenting where really little children, I see this sometimes in a restaurant or in Target or whatever, really tiny, tiny children who clearly are not old enough to self-regulate are being told, stop your crying or do this or do that. And they can't. They're just not capable of it yet.
Well, and quite honestly, I mean, even as adults, life has a habit of throwing stuff at us that is hard, that can be a crisis, that can be very hard on the nervous system. And even then, we often need someone that helps us regulate. I mean,
I
it happens all the time.
absolutely. I mean, we can probably make it through. You can grit your teeth and get through. But, I was reading a book today and this really great line came out as a book on trauma. Basically, no one heals from trauma alone.
No.
You can't. We need each other and we
Yeah.
need each other to make sense of things. And And some of that is, sometimes what I need from my people, Ursula being very key, sometimes I need her good brain. Sometimes I just need another brain. My
Yeah.
brain is, I've got like a bias, or I'm blocked somewhere. I've got a cognitive bias that I'm holding on to without even being totally aware of it,
Yeah.
right? So I might need her brain to go, is that really true? Like, hold on a minute,
What are we talking about here?
right? And I also need her nervous system so that if I'm really freaking out about something, as you said, it's like she's like the rock in the middle of the stormy sea.
Yes.
And so it's not just, the logical thing, although there are times when that's super helpful, but it's the being and the presence of the other body that I'm in relationship to
Yeah.
that matters.
Yeah. And that very much goes to then Siegel's definition. It is embodied and relational, and it helps us regulate.
Helps us regulate the flow of energy and information. And he has these words, I mentioned them before, that he really likes, that what we're doing is we're monitoring and modifying.
I love that.
Isn't that good? And
I love
that,
those. I share this with every client. It is such a good pointer of what is happening right
what are
now.
we actually doing? What's our
Yeah.
brain doing? What's our mind, our mind doing? It's monitoring and modifying. And a lot of what we're trying to do in coaching and in human development and in growth is monitor and modify in a more effective way.
Yes.
And the ability to sort of go, I was grading a student on a coaching today, and it was just such a cool thing to see. And I didn't have like a history of his coaching client. I was just watching him do one of our tools. They do a great job. And it was really clear that this young client, it was a young person, was like, I kept saying, well, I used to think that, but now I see this. And I said, like, I don't know how long you've been working with him, but good job. Because
Yeah.
this young client was clearly more able to monitor
Yes.
and modify his behavior in a way that was making him more effective in life.
Well, and I think that's the great gift of coaching. I mean, we call it awareness, but it is the client's ability to actually monitor. Because if you're not aware what's going on and where it's coming from, and I think that's where, the neuroscience can be so helpful. It helps us looking at the different places of the system and going like, hey, I'm monitoring this right now. I wonder what's going on. And then we have the tools from coaching to be able to modify. And that
Yeah.
keeps the system, that keeps the system in balance.
And we're doing it anyway. We're monitoring and modifying. And the question is, are we doing it in a way that is helping us grow? Or are we monitoring and modifying in a way that is keeping us in fear and keeping us safe? And either way. So again, I come back to that none of this is, it's like I like to say, like gravity. It's a neutral. It doesn't care what you think, right? And you can use gravity to stay on this earth and,
Yeah.
do things, or you can, trip and fall because gravity pulled you back, or something fell and hit you on the head.
Yeah.
Gravity doesn't care. And these processes, even the way our mind works, can be sort of automatic and without awareness, where we're not modifying in any way and we just keep modifying in a way it's like the keep me safe no matter what. Or we can go, oh, I need to say something courageous here,
Hmm.
you know? And I think about the place where I told you this is a relationship I just pulled the plug on. I was like,
Yeah.
this doesn't work for me. Um, and I'm thinking that, 10 or 15 years ago,
Mm,
it would have been harder for me to, modify that in a way that honored me. I
mm.
would have said, well, you know, I
Yeah.
mean, the truth of the matter is that they sent me something to sign and I, skimmed over it. It looked fine, but I did not read the fine print. And I didn't. I'm not good at that. And I would have felt obligated. And
Yeah.
I would have continued on and done the thing, even though it didn't fit for me. And now I'm just like, we're not very far down the road. I'm just going to bow out and wish you well. I'm able to modify in a
Yes.
way that supports me and my energy much more so than I was 15 years ago or
You
10.
know, it's interesting. I've always looked at modify and monitor and modify more from an effective state. It's actually never occurred to me that people are monitoring and then modifying in a way that's not effective.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm modifying.
Yeah, that I've always thought, of course, when you monitor that you're not doing great, then you need to modify so that you can do better.
Well,
It's
and
never
you
occurred to me
can.
that actually sometimes people modify and they start feeling
Well,
worse and
let
worse.
me give you an example. So you know, and you know, I'm pretty public about this that I don't know, 7 years ago or so, I got involved with a guy who's probably was probably a clinical narcissist. He's a terrible, terrible human being. Really fooled me. And, you know, one of the ways I monitored and modified is, you know, I started out kind of down one road and we were both
Mm.
on this same road and he was super interested and he'd be like, oh, tell me more about that. That sounds really cool. Because he was trying to hook me in,
Yeah.
right? Well, fairly early on in the relationship, he stopped being interested and I would come to him and say, oh, I just figured this out. And he would be sort of very subtly insulting like, yeah, boy, you really love to have everything under control, don't you? You know, like it's really important to you. It's really not important to me anymore, but that's fine if it's important to you. And it didn't feel good. So
Yep.
I'm monitoring that and I'm modifying, which is I'm not bringing him my secrets anymore.
Mhm.
I'm not bringing him what I'm thinking about because he's shown me he's not interested.
And
So,
he's not safe.
and he's not safe. And if
Exactly.
I say something, I run the risk of being insulted.
Hmm.
So I'm going to modify my behavior so that I don't get a negative outcome.
Yes.
Because he's already shown me,
Yeah.
you try a couple of times, you're like, okay, not safe.
Yeah.
So we do that.
Absolutely.
Of
Yep.
course, we're
No,
constantly
yeah, I
doing that.
mean, I'm glad we've gone down this road because, as I said, I've always held it in, okay, obviously I know this is not working. There's something happening here. What do I need to do to be more of an effective human being? But you're absolutely right. It's neutral and it can go either way.
Absolutely. And I think this is why it's really common for people to come out of a traumatic situation, whether it's like bullying in the
Yeah.
workplace or family system or
Yeah.
romantic partner, like in my case. And if they've been in it for long enough, this is something I hear again and again. I don't know who I am. It's
Hmm.
like, yeah, because every time you said, okay,
Yeah.
I'm not going to share that because it didn't go well last time, it's
Yeah.
like peeling a piece of your soul off. And
Yeah.
this is why I've had such zero tolerance for any of these, kind of relationships. I mean, I do understand why people get stuck in them and do my best to help people get out of them.
Yeah.
But because it strips away your soul
Yeah.
to have to monitor and modify around a sense of safety,
Yeah.
um, certainly as an adult, like
Yeah, and then I think we go back to when we're in that situation and we monitor, then we modify, and it will become again an adaptive strategy because all
absolutely.
we want is to be safe. And so the modification is how can I be safe in this situation, which doesn't necessarily equate with being the most effective human being that you can be,
Or being
or
happy. And I
healthy,
think,
happy, effective, all of that.
at some point when you are monitoring and modifying sort of toward the just to stay safe zone, if you are in that relationship for too long, it just becomes who you are in the world.
Yes. Yep.
And I think there's a period there where you're not necessarily that way in every relationship, because the other people are interested. And so your
Yep.
brain says, well, I'll tell Ursula, she'll be interested. But spend 10 years in that, you may start deciding that that you can't bring anything to anybody.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
Yeah,
so I
absolutely.
want to make sort of a final point about
Please,
this.
please do.
Because I was talking about this the other day. I was doing a webinar on all of basically talking more about the mind and how we use that in coaching. And it really occurred to me, this is why AI cannot replace coaches. There
Hmm.
may be a role for it. We'll probably do another talk about it. But right now, what is the deal. AI, it's not embodied, so it can't feel a closed up throat or
Yeah,
anything with it has no mirror neurons or
yeah,
ability to have mirror neurons. It can fake it, but that's just weird. And it's not relational. And part of the reason is it's not reciprocal. Now, with a client, there's a reciprocity of payment, but there's also always energy between us.
totally.
It's not just you. My clients know a few small things. I'm a human to them. They know a few small things about me,
Yeah,
you know, even if it's just I haven't had my coffee yet that morning, whatever it is. So
yeah,
AI is not embodied, it's not relational, and it can't, so therefore, it can't truly, in an effective way, basically work with this flow of energy and information in a fully complete way. And so I don't think we'll ever have anything that is equivalent to human intelligence unless you recreate a human.
yeah. No, absolutely. And I would totally put a highlighter to that, and just simply looking at that from the, Dan Siegel's definition of what the mind is. It is relational, and a machine is, you don't have a relationship with a machine, and it definitely cannot regulate the flow of energy and information. It just is not capable of it. Um,
Because some of our energy isn't just words.
exactly.
It's, the whole rest of the
Yeah.
picture
Yeah.
that is sometimes harder to measure, harder to understand. Um, so I think about, basically anybody that would want to like recreate my wisdom on a chat bot, you're not gonna recreate me because I'm a fully embodied human being who, is present in a relationship, in a real relationship.
And tuned into the relationship,
Yeah.
back to the tuning and attunement, and that is something that is such a gift that we have as humans, that a machine could never duplicate that.
Yeah. And I just go back to that thing I said earlier where, my clients generally get off the coaching session and they're like, I just feel better. And that's not just because of what I said. It was because of who I was, the
Yeah,
presence that I had with them, the ability that they had to maybe tell me a hard thing,
yeah,
or the fact that I questioned something rather than just going blindly with it as if it's a,
yes,
like, hold on a minute. Is that really who you want to be?
yeah,
Like I'm not just going to decide that
yeah,
everything they say is good or right. Um,
yes.
so I believe the human will continue and actually will become more and more necessary in the realm of human development, um, as we kind of, see this very interesting time that we're in.
Well, and I
What
think
I
this,
think.
this is already true. When you think about, the texting, the emails, everything is there's so many things are machine related these days, and people feel more and more disconnected from humanity. People feel lonelier than ever before. So I think this human connection that we create in this safe coaching container is going to become more and more important, because people are going to seek out humans
I
that
love
have
that.
the ability to feel from the body, from the heart, and connect on that level.
You know, I'm going to say one other thing about
Yep.
that because it's so perfect here. So, one of the very, very first things I ever read about Dan Siegel, and it actually was part of sending us down this whole neuroscience path, is he was talking to a client who was completing therapy with him. And this young woman said to him, Dan, with other therapists, I have felt heard. With you, I feel felt.
Mm.
And that's why we're irreplaceable.
I think this is a very good last sentence to finish on. So, thanks everybody for listening. We hope this was helpful. If it sparked some curiosity, then we are great and we're grateful. So, if you liked it, like us, subscribe, share it, and yeah, the mind is embodied and relational.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care. Bye bye.